He had not seen her face in 37 years. He did not know she was sitting right next to him. And by the time that plane touched down, nothing between them would ever be the same again. If you're here for the first time, subscribe and like so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Gate B, 12. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. A Tuesday morning in late October, the kind of morning that makes the whole world feel like it is holding its breath. The terminal is full of the usual noise, rolling suitcases, boarding announcements, the particular restless energy of people who are going somewhere and cannot quite decide how they feel about it. Among them, moving slowly through the crowd, is a man named Raymond Calloway. He is 71 years old. His hair has gone the color of ash. His hands, once steady and strong, now carry the faint tremor of a man who has lived hard and rested too little. He is wearing a gray button-down shirt tucked into dark slacks, the collar slightly too big for his neck now, the way collars get when a man has lost weight he did not plan to lose. He is flying from Atlanta to Portland, Oregon. One-way ticket. He bought it 6 weeks ago, sat on it for 4, and almost canceled it twice. He has a small carry-on bag and a manila envelope in his inside jacket pocket. The envelope is the reason he is on this plane. He has not looked inside it in 3 days because looking inside it does what looking at a wound does. It reminds you it is still there. Raymond finds his seat, 14A, window. He settles in slowly, the way older men do when joints have opinions. He places his carry-on in the overhead bin, lowers himself into the seat, and looks out at the tarmac. It is raining lightly. The ground crew moves through the mist in orange vests. He watches them the way a man watches something when he is not really watching anything at all, when his eyes are pointed outward but his mind is somewhere 37 years behind him. The plane fills. People shuffle past. Overhead bins slam. A child 2 rows back is already complaining about something. Raymond does not notice any of it. He is back in 1988. He is always back in 1988 when he lets himself go there. She almost missed the flight. Her name is Diane Louise Mercer. She is 43 years old, a speech therapist who has worked for the Portland School District for 15 years. She has brown eyes and her mother's hands, strong, practical hands, and a way of listening to people that makes them feel, without quite knowing why, that they have been fully heard. Her students adore her. Her colleagues trust her. She has built a life in Portland that is steady and full and real. She almost missed the flight because she stopped in the terminal newsstand to buy a paperback. She is a reader. Always has been, since childhood. When books were the place, she went when the house got quiet in the wrong way. She grabbed the first novel that caught her eye, paid quickly, and ran. She drops into seat 14B just as the gate agent makes the final boarding call. She is slightly out of breath. She shoves her bag under the seat in front of her, pulls out the paperback, and exhales. The man in 14A glances over briefly, the automatic reflex of noticing a new seatmate, and gives her the small nod that strangers give each other on planes. She returns it. That is all. 2 people who do not know each other, settling in for a 5-hour flight. Nothing remarkable about it. Except for this. Raymond Calloway left a family behind in Portland, Oregon, 37 years ago. He had a wife named Carol. He had a daughter. That daughter was 6 years old when he walked out. Her name was Diane. He does not know her face. She was 6 years old the last time he saw her. 6-year-old faces do not survive into 43-year-old ones in any way a person could recognize on an airplane. And Diane, she has never seen a photo of Raymond past his mid-30s. Her mother had none, or if she did not keep them where they could be found. So they sit. 14A, 14B, father and daughter. 37 years of silence compressed into 18 inches of shared armrest. Neither of them knows. To understand what is happening on this plane, you have to understand what happened in Portland in the spring of 1988. Not the version Raymond tells himself, that has been softened by decades of self-justification and selective memory. The actual version. The one that Carol Calloway lived through. The one that Diane grew up carrying without having the words for it. Raymond Calloway was 34 years old that spring. He worked as a machinist at a manufacturing plant in Northeast Portland. He was not a cruel man. That is important to say, because the easiest version of this story is the one where he is a villain, and the truth is more complicated and in some ways harder to carry. He was not cruel. He was scared. He was overwhelmed. He was a man who had never been taught how to stay when staying got difficult, because no one had ever stayed for him. His own father left when Raymond was 9. His mother raised him and his two brothers in a small house in Macon, Georgia, working double shifts at the hospital laundry. She did it without complaint and without asking for acknowledgement, and she gave her boys everything she had. But she could not give them what she did not have herself, which was the example of a man who remained, who showed up, who chose his family over and over again when leaving would have been easier. Raymond married Carol Patterson in 1981. She was 26. He was 27. They were in love in the way people are at 27, fully and without much planning for what love requires when the feeling gets complicated. Carol was bright and determined, working as a bookkeeper for a small construction company, putting money aside. She wanted a house. She wanted stability. She wanted a life that did not feel like it was held together with string. Diane was born in 1982. Raymond was in the delivery room. He held his daughter in the first hour of her life and felt something he did not have a name for, something so large it frightened him. That, too, is important to understand. The love was real. The terror of the love was also real. And for Raymond Calloway, who had never been shown how to hold something precious without dropping it, those two things lived side by side and could not find peace with each other. The years between 1982 and 1988 were years of accumulating pressure. Money was tight. The plant had layoffs. Raymond and Carol fought, not with violence, but with the particular coldness of two people who have run out of the language to reach each other. Raymond started drinking more. Not catastrophically, not in a way that made headlines, but enough. Enough to dull the edges of things. Enough to make the distance between himself and his family feel like something other than his own doing. In April of 1988, he left. He packed a bag while Carol was at work and Diane was at school. He drove to his brother's place in Atlanta. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he would get himself together and go back. He told himself that a lot of things. He never went back. He sent money when he could, which was not always. He called, sometimes, in the first year or two, brief, awkward calls that left everyone worse off than before. And then the calls stopped. And then the money stopped. And then he became the thing that a lot of men who leave their families eventually become, a name without a face, and then not even a name. Just an absence. Just a space in the shape of a father. Research tells us what that kind of absence does to a child. Studies from institutions, including the National Initiative for Fatherhood and published in journals of developmental psychology, have documented it carefully. Girls who grow up without fathers are at significantly higher risk of anxiety, depression, and struggles with self-worth. They often spend years searching for the validation they were supposed to receive at home, in places, and people who cannot always provide it safely. They learn to be self-sufficient in ways they should not have had to learn so young. They become, in many cases, extraordinarily capable, because they had no choice but to be. That is what happened to Diane. She was smart, and she worked hard, and she built a life that was genuinely her own. But she also spent her 20s in and out of therapy, trying to understand why she did not quite trust people who said they would stay. Why she was always waiting for the door to open in the wrong direction. Why, even on her best days, there was something underneath that felt unfinished. Her therapist had a name for the shape of it. Her therapist said, "You are still waiting for an explanation. You are still waiting to know why you were not enough reason for him to stay." Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if this story is already hitting close to home, do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Raymond Calloway spent 37 years becoming someone he almost respected. After Atlanta, he drifted for a while, took work where he could find it, moved to Birmingham, then to Nashville, then back to Atlanta, where he finally stopped moving. He got sober at 41. Really sober, not the managed kind, but the kind where you sit in a folding chair in a church basement and say your name and mean it. He attended those meetings for 11 years. He still goes, though less often now. Old habit, good habit, the kind of habit that reminds you who you used to be so you do not slide back into them. He remarried briefly in his late 40s. A woman named Sheila, a school librarian who was patient with him longer than he deserved. That marriage lasted 4 years before she told him, without cruelty, that she felt like she was sharing him with a ghost. She was right. He was always sharing himself with the ghost of what he had done. There was not enough of him left over. He worked. He was good at his job, eventually moved into supervising, then into training new machinists, which he found he had a gift for. He was the kind of supervisor that younger workers came to with real problems, not just work problems. He listened well. He gave advice carefully. It is one of the stranger facts about people who have failed at something important. They sometimes become very good at helping others not fail the same way. But the guilt never left. That is not a dramatic statement. It is simply true. There is a particular kind of guilt that does not announce itself loudly. It does not come in dramatic waves. It just sits. It sits in the ordinary moments. At Thanksgiving, when the table only had 2 or 3 people around it. In the mornings when he passed playgrounds on his way to work. In the evenings when he watched other men his age talk about their adult children with the casual ease of people who had earned the right. He had a friend, a man from his AA group named Walter, who asked him once, over coffee, what he thought about most. Raymond had thought about it for a moment and then said, "I think about what she looks like now." Walter had said, "Have you tried to find her?" And Raymond had said, "I don't have the right." He held that position for many years. The position that guilt rendered him unentitled to reach out. That he had forfeited the right to know. It was, in its own way, a comfortable position, because it meant he never had to find out whether she would reject him, whether she would be rightfully furious, whether the door he had walked out of 37 years ago could not be opened from the outside. Then, 8 months ago, Raymond was diagnosed with a heart condition. Not immediately life-threatening. His cardiologist was careful to say that, but serious enough to require attention, lifestyle changes, and a conversation about the future. Raymond sat in the cardiologist's office and listened and nodded and drove home and sat in his armchair for 2 hours without turning on the television. He was thinking about Diane. He was thinking about what it would mean to die without ever having tried. About the difference between not deserving something and actively refusing to attempt it. About what Walter had asked him years ago. He was thinking about the manila envelope he had put together over the past several months. A letter he had written and rewritten 43 times. A copy of his AA chip. A photograph of himself from last year, so she would know what he looked like. A single sheet of paper with his phone number and address and the words, "I am not asking for forgiveness. I am only asking you to know that I am sorry. That I know what I did. That I think about you every day." He mailed a copy to the last address he had for Carol. An address he had tracked down through 3 phone calls and a great deal of luck. He did not know if Carol still lived there. He did not know if the letter would reach Diane at all. He had no expectation that it would be received well. Then he bought a plane ticket to Portland. Not to show up at anyone's door. Not to force anything. Just to be in the same city. Just to see the streets where his daughter had grown up without him. He did not know exactly why this mattered. It just did. The way some things matter not because they make sense, but because not doing them has started to feel like a kind of slow suffocation. The plane takes off at 9:42 a.m. The rain over Atlanta blurs the runway and then disappears below them, and then there is just gray cloud and then blue sky above it, the way there always is above the clouds, which is one of those facts that never loses its ability to feel like a metaphor. For the first hour, Raymond and Diane do not speak. This is normal. Most seatmates on 5-hour flights do not speak. They read, or they sleep, or they watch something on a small screen, or they do the thing where they stare at nothing while their minds work through whatever they brought onto the plane with them. Diane is reading her novel, though she has read the same page 3 times. She is thinking about Portland. She is thinking about the letter. Because the letter arrived. It arrived 6 weeks ago, forwarded from her mother's old address to the house where Diane now lives. Her mother, Carol, passed away 4 years ago. A stroke, sudden, at 67. Among the things Diane had taken from her mother's house were boxes of documents, letters, keepsakes that she had not yet fully sorted through. Her mother's forwarding address was still active. The post office does not know that Carol is gone. Diane had opened the envelope not knowing what it was. She had read the letter standing in her kitchen in her work clothes, having just come home from a long day. She read it twice. She put it down on the counter. She went and sat on the couch. She did not move for a long time. She felt, in sequence, rage, grief, something dangerously close to relief, and then more grief. Then a cold, clarifying anger. Then, underneath all of it, the thing she had spent years learning to recognize in her therapy work with children. The thing that shows up when something long unanswered is finally, however imperfectly, addressed. It was not forgiveness. It was not yet anything close to that. But it was the end of a certain kind of not knowing. She had called her best friend, a woman named Joyce, and read the letter out loud over the phone. Joyce had been quiet throughout. At the end, she said, "What do you want to do?" Diane had said she did not know. And that was the truth. She did not know. What she didn't know was that she had a conference in Atlanta, a speech therapy symposium she had been scheduled to attend for months, and that the conference was now over, and that she was on a plane flying back home, and that she had spent the entire 5 days of the conference with that letter folded inside her bag, thinking about it between sessions, thinking about it at dinner, thinking about it in her hotel room at night. She still did not know what she wanted to do. Raymond, in 14A, is looking out at the clouds. He is thinking about Diane the way he often does, as a 6-year-old. He has no updated image to replace that one. He thinks about her small hands. He thinks about the way she used to say his name, Daddy, with 2 clear, confident syllables, the way children say things before they learn that some words carry risk. He thinks about the night he read her a bedtime story the week before he left, and how she had fallen asleep before the end, and how he had sat on the edge of her bed in the dark for a long time, knowing something was wrong with him, and not yet knowing he was about to make it everyone else's problem too. He reaches into his jacket pocket, touches the envelope, does not take it out. It starts over turbulence. The plane hits a rough patch somewhere over eastern Nevada. Not dangerous, just the kind of sustained shaking that makes first-time flyers grip their armrests and makes experienced flyers look up from whatever they were doing. Raymond grips the armrest. He is not a nervous flyer, but the condition has made him more conscious of his body than he used to be, more aware of the things that could go wrong. Diane notices. She glances over, not nosily, just the reflex of a person trained to observe. She says, lightly, "It is usually just mountain air." He thanks her. She nods and goes back to her book. But then he says, "Do you fly often?" And she says, "More than I used to." "Work." And he says, "What kind of work?" And she tells him, "Speech therapy. Children mostly." She talks about it the way people talk about work they genuinely love, not with performance, but with the casual warmth of something that has been lived in long enough to become part of the person. She tells him about a student she worked with for 2 years, a boy who had severe language delays and who, last spring, stood up in front of his class and read a paragraph out loud. She says, "I don't usually cry at work." She says, "That day I cried at work." Raymond listens. He is good at listening. He learned it late, but he learned it well. And something is happening to him as he listens that he cannot fully account for. Something about the way she talks. The cadence of it. A particular phrase she uses. She says the word steady in a certain way, drawing it out slightly, the way Carol used to. He dismisses it. Carol is gone. This woman is a stranger on a plane. He tells her he is going to Portland. She says she lives there. He says he has not been in a long time. She asks why he is going. There is a pause, the kind of pause that on airplanes, between strangers, gets filled with whatever truth is closest to the surface. He says, "I have someone there I need to see. Or try to see." He pauses. "Someone I let down a long time ago." Diane looks at him. She does not say anything right away. Then she says, "That takes courage." He gives a short, rueful sound that is almost a laugh. He says, "I am not sure it is courage. I think it might just be running out of time." She is quiet for a moment. Then she says, "Can I ask, how long ago?" He says, 37 years. She goes very still. The turbulence has stopped. The plane is smooth and quiet. Outside the window, the clouds have broken open into a long stretch of clear sky and the shadow of the wings traced across the white below them. She says, carefully, "Did you leave a family?" And Raymond Calloway, who has not spoken these words to a stranger in 37 years, says, "Yes. I had a wife. And a daughter. She was 6 years old." Diane puts her book face down on her tray table. She says, "We're in Portland." He says, "Northeast side. Killingsworth area." Her hands are completely still in her lap. She says, "What was your wife's name?" He looks at her then. Really looks at her. For the first time since she sat down. He says, "Carol. Carol Patterson Calloway." Diane says, "My mother's name was Carol Patterson Calloway." The sentence lands between them like something dropped from a great height. Neither of them moves. Neither of them speaks. The engines continue their steady, indifferent roar. Somewhere behind them, that child is asleep now. A flight attendant passes the aisle with a cart. The plane continues its path through the sky at 37,000 feet, carrying its cargo of ordinary people and their invisible weights, as it was always going to do, as it was always going to bring these 2 people to this exact moment. Raymond's voice, when he finds it, is barely above a whisper. He says, "Diane?" She turns to look at him fully. Her eyes are filled, not spilling over, filled. She says, "You sent a letter." He says, "You got it." She says, "I got it." There is no version of this conversation that is clean or simple. That should be said plainly. There is no version of 37 years of absence that gets resolved at 37,000 feet over the American West. The wound is real. The damage is documented not just in Diane's personal history, but in research conducted by psychologists across decades. Research that shows the absence of a father reshapes a daughter's sense of self, her relationship to trust, her interior map of what it means to be worth staying for. Diane Mercer knows this research. She works with children every day who are living inside variations of the same story she lived. She chose her work, on some level, because of this story. Because she understood early what it meant to struggle to find your voice. And she wanted to help other children find theirs faster than she had found her own. So she does not collapse into his arms. She does not offer immediate absolution. She is 43 years old, and she has worked too hard and too long to hand out grace she has not yet decided to give. But she also does not turn away. What happens between them in the remaining hour of that flight is not a reconciliation. It is something quieter and more honest than that. It is two people beginning to see each other for the first time, not as the father who left and the daughter who was left, but as actual human beings with actual lives that have continued, separately, and brought them each to this exact altitude. She asks him questions. Some of them are hard questions, asked with the steadiness of someone who has spent years in therapy learning how to ask the things that need asking without destroying herself in the asking. He answers them as honestly as he can, which is to say, imperfectly, with gaps, with the particular awkwardness of a man trying to account for choices that never fully made sense even to himself. He tells her about the sobriety. She listens. He tells her about Sheila and the marriage that didn't hold. She listens. He tells her about the cardiologist's office and the 2 hours in the armchair. She listens to all of it the way she listens to everything, fully, without rushing to a verdict. She tells him about her mother. She tells him that Carol worked 2 jobs for years and put Diane through school and never once said his name with bitterness, at least not in front of Diane. She tells him that Carol died thinking he was still out there somewhere, and that she had told Diane in the last year of her life. I hope someday you get an answer. Not a relationship. Just an answer. Something to close the question with. Raymond receives this. He does not try to minimize it or to explain it away. He simply receives it, the way a man receives something he knows he earned. Outside the window, Oregon is beginning to appear below them, the coast range green and folded, the silver thread of the Columbia, the city spreading out toward the mountain that stands watch over all of it. The plane descends. The city comes into focus below them, street by street. Raymond Calloway looks out the window at Portland, Oregon, for the first time in 37 years. He is not a man given to poetry. But later, if anyone asks him what it looked like coming in from the air, he will say, "It looked like something I had no right to, and was being given anyway." As the wheels touch down, Diane takes out a business card from her bag. She holds it for a moment. Then she places it on the tray table in front of him. She says, "I am not ready. I want to be honest with you about that. I am not ready for whatever this is." He nods. She says, "But I also did not come this far." She pauses, and the word means more than geography, to turn away without knowing. He picks up the card. He looks at it carefully. He places it in his shirt pocket, over his heart, which is imperfect and medically compromised and still beating. The plane rolls to the gate. Around them, passengers stand and reach for bags and make calls and do all the ordinary things that people do when they land. The world resumes its normal pace, indifferent to what has just happened in seats 14A and 14B. Diane stands. She pulls her bag from under the seat. She looks at Raymond once more, this old man who is her father, this stranger she has known for 5 hours and 37 years simultaneously, and she says, "I will be in touch." He says, "I will be here." And then she moves into the aisle, and is carried forward with the crowd, and steps off the plane and into the terminal, and into Portland, and into a future that is no longer missing its most unanswered question. Raymond stays in his seat until the plane is nearly empty. He sits with the card in his pocket and the envelope against his chest, and the rain-wet tarmac of PDX outside the window. He is not weeping, though he would have every reason to. He is simply sitting with what has happened, the way a man sits with something enormous, carefully, and without rushing to understand it all at once. He left this city 37 years ago believing he was not enough. He landed here this morning as something more complicated than that. Not forgiven, not absolved, but known, acknowledged, looked at squarely by his daughter's eyes. For a man who spent 37 years avoiding that gaze, it is, perhaps, the most terrifying and the most necessary thing that has ever happened to him. He picks up his carry-on. He walks off the plane. He steps into Portland. The rest of the story belongs to them, and to time, and to the difficult, irreplaceable work of two people who share blood and history and grief, learning, slowly, whether they can build something new in the space where absence used to live. Some wounds do not close neatly. Some fathers do not get second chances. Some daughters spend their whole lives waiting for a letter that never comes. But sometimes, not always, not automatically, not without cost, a plane lands. A seat is assigned by an algorithm with no knowledge of what it is doing. And fate, or chance, or whatever you choose to call the force that arranges such things, sets two people down beside each other at 37,000 feet. And the rest becomes the kind of story that people tell, quietly, in the dark, when they need to believe that it is not always too late. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more stories like this.